Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the virtual book launch of Ougat, From a Hoe into a Housewife and Then Some by Shana Fife. My name is Jennifer Malik. I'm the editor of the reading list, and we are hosting this event tonight along with Jonathan Ball Publishers. Unsettlingly honest and brutally blunt, Ougat is Shana Fife's story of survival, of surviving the social conditioning of her Cape Flats community, of surviving sexual violence and depression, and of ultimately escaping a cycle of abuse. In conversation with Shana this afternoon is renowned author and radio presenter, Sara-Jayne King. Hi, Sara-Jayne. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Please leave your questions about the book or about the discussion or anything that comes into your mind while you're listening to the conversation. Leave those questions in the comment section wherever you're watching this video, on Facebook or on YouTube, as we'll have time to cover some of those questions during a Q&A towards the end of the session. Without further ado, let me hand over to Sara-Jayne to take over the chat. And enjoy the launch.
Thanks, Jennifer. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for logging in, tuning in, however it is that you are reaching us today. It's quite a strange setup because normally when you do a Facebook Live or something or a Zoom, you can see how many people, so have no idea how many of you there are. I'm guessing by the fact that this is all over the place, there's probably quite a few of you. So thank you so much. And before we start, I do just want to extend a communal congratulations to Shana for writing this incredible book. I'm hoping that over the next sort of hour, which is what we've got, we will be able to delve into some of the themes that she speaks about in the book. And of course, as Jennifer just said, there is going to be an opportunity for you to put your questions to Shana, which I'm completely confident you will want to do. I know that a lot of you have already got a copy of the book. For those who haven't, please go out and buy a copy. And if you've already got a copy, go and get another copy and give it to your friends and family. I was really privileged when Shana asked me to do a shout for the book. And it was, I knew Shana could write, because obviously I've been following her blog, probably like many of you have for a number of years. But I had no idea the depth of her writing. I don't think I really had any idea the depth of her soul either, but it comes through in this extraordinary book. And I said in that shout that there's an entire generation of South African women who ought to read this book. And I'm going to maybe amend that slightly and say there's an entire generation of South Africans that need to read this book, because it's, I think, will prove to become probably one of the seminal works around identity, around abuse, around womanhood, that we will see coming out of the country in a very, very long time. Shana, hello, welcome.
Hello.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That was a lovely introduction. I'm too emotional. Thank you.
It's all right to be emotional. It's definitely at a book launch you can be emotional. Listen, as I said, a lot of people got to know you through the blog, and you have avid followers and people who sort of hang off your every word. So why the book? Was it always the plan? Was it always the idea, or was there something that sparked the idea that you wanted to write a book?
So it wasn't always the plan. It was certainly one of those things that I would have liked, when I started blogging. But when Jonathan Ball approached me, I was writing a different book. It wasn't a memoir. Sorry, is my sound funny?
That's you're all good. You're good. Has she frozen? Yes, she has. You've frozen a little bit. It's all right. You've frozen, but you're back. Okay. We are gonna, Jennifer, I don't know if you are still there. I wonder if we can just ask Shana to maybe connect and disconnect and then connect again.
So I've had great internet the whole day. I am so sorry. I'm going to try that again. Was it always the plan? Hi, Jennifer. I don't know what has happened.
All good. Okay.
Cool. No. I thought about it. Because when I started writing, a book is like that thing you always have in the back of your mind, but it's a big task. I didn't even know how big of a task it was. But when Amy Carlson from Jonathan Ball contacted me, and she was like, she read my blog, and she was wondering if I would like to put my story out there to a larger audience. I think that's when I realized that that was what I wanted to do. That if, because of all the women who had contacted me over the years and said, my story resonated with them,
Mm.
I was like, well, then if it can reach a larger platform and it feels in my soul, this is the time. And that's when it happened. I didn't necessarily plan to ever write a book about me because I felt at that point that I'd already said everything.
I want to go back to something that you said just now about people writing to you and resonating in just a second. But I am a big fan of the genre of memoir. I love reading it. I love writing it. But I am firmly of the opinion that it only works if it's relatable. And the only way it can be relatable is through authenticity and honesty. And there are some memoirs that I've read that I've thought that would make a really great fiction memoir where the protagonist wants to make themselves look good. But as a memoir, it doesn't work because you can tell that the author is so conscious of how they're going to be viewed in writing that there is almost a kind of unnatural sheen to their existence. All these crappy things can be going on around them, but they've played no part in it. And what strikes me and struck me about your writing, and I think that's why this book is doing and will continue to do so well, is that you are very self-deprecating. You are very, very authentic in your voice. There was no feeling of Shana wants us to feel this certain way about her. Were you conscious of that? Were there moments where you were worried about how you come across? Because you've done some hectic stuff. And it's not that we haven't all done hectic stuff, but we don't all write about it and sell it at exclusive books.
So I did have moments of this might be too far, but it was the truth. And sometimes, in order for me to tell the rest of the story, I kind of have to tell you the truth about the event that wasn't so lekker, so that I can get to the point. But I do think because of all the bad things that happened to me, part of my spirit is whittled down to the point where I don't think that anybody could see me worse than I saw myself at one point. So there's really no stakes involved when I tell the truth. I've already embarrassed myself and still sometimes continue to embarrass myself deeply or do things that people find strange and only realize afterwards. So I had nothing, and I had the babies, I had the weird boyfriends, the several relationships. There's nothing I can say about myself that other people weren't all saying at some time. So I didn't find it that scary when I sat down and wrote over.
You said that there had been women writing to you over the years to kind of to relate to what you were saying in the blog. And at the start of the book, you talk about how at this really low point in 2014, you sat and asked yourself, do other women feel the same way that I do? And I think that leads us sort of really nicely into this idea that you write about, which that for so many of us in our families and in our communities, there is both an overt and an implied communication that happens at some point, probably a pre-verbal even, that you will not talk about certain things. And so therefore we are all often for a long time existing shoulder to shoulder with other women who are living the same experiences that we are, but not knowing that that's what we're doing. Did you know that you were shining a light on this stuff? And even taking you back to the time when you started blogging, that sense of then maybe there'll be somebody out there who feels like I do.
The first time, it was more about shining a light on me and my own journey. And as it progressed and as women messaged me, it became about shining a light on our journey. Where, like, there were things that I didn't even know other women I didn't even consider was a woman thing. I just thought it was a me thing, like sexual things. Even thoughts about like the generation that raised us, for example. You told that you are only allowed to have certain thoughts about them, and that I'm rude if I think that they are wrong or that they done not logical. Everything. It didn't have to just be. It's just about being open. It was about being open, and if people caught onto it, that was that was like an added bonus. But I was mostly at the beginning shining a light on myself, and I just wanted people to know I didn't like secrets anymore. I felt like I was living two lives. I was real Shana, and the Shana I was taught to show everybody, and that was exhausting. And I feel like we still praise. Sorry, I'm going off topic, but I feel like
No, you know.
this is where my brain is going. Um, I feel like we kind of reward lying a little bit. Like we reward being professional or polite or the way you need to act in front of other people. So I hardly encounter authentic, and I really wanted to be authentic, even if that meant that the people I wanted to accept me didn't anymore. You know?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. One of the kind of following on from that, one of the overarching themes of this book is the idea of expectation, and expectations that we place on ourselves, expectations that our families place on us, expectations that our communities place on us. And the one that you write about specifically, and it's to do, that you will relate to, and that I'm sure so many women will relate to, is this idea of an almost preordained destiny of a respectable colored girl, what she looks like and what she definitely doesn't look like. And I want you we're going to have we're going to go into the book now. I want you to read the first few paragraphs of chapter 7.
Okay. Yes, page 90.
Yeah.
Okay, just stop me when you've had enough. Tell me when to stop.
You can finish at puss.
Okay. I'll do that. Okay. Chapter 7. The end of my life. My head hung heavy in October 2010. I was 3 months shy of my 21st birthday, and I had committed the one unforgivable act for a colored girl from the flats. I sat on the toilet, staring at the pregnancy test, mostly confused by how I had fallen so far down the social ladder so quickly. The sex I had been having wasn't even worth the trouble I was in. But the two lines that were almost glowing in one of the darkest moments of my life were there, and they weren't fading. I kept staring at them, though I don't know what I was hoping would happen. I was just too scared to look away. I do remember that it was a Sunday and that I was getting ready to go to church. If this were a text, I would type LOL. My entire life could be summed up by just fucking typing LOL. At this point, I had graduated college with poor results. I had started working at the call center instead of pursuing any of my actual life goals, and I was dating a boy I didn't even like because his bossy, obnoxious sister was my only work friend. As for good measure, and for good measure, to really give my mother a heart attack, he was Muslim. I was a Catholic, colored 20-year-old girl who was pregnant by a 19-year-old Muslim call center worker I didn't like. I was, for all intents and purposes, burning in my piss. Jesus.
that for me sums up I mean, it's obviously such a small part of the book, but it sums up the it's the antithesis of what your family, your community would have wanted. You couldn't be veering further off the respectable colored girl narrative. When you look back at that, you're 20 years old, you're pregnant, all of these things. How do you feel towards 20-year-old Shana in that we've just heard from? Like, is there, because I often find, and particularly in writing memoir, what I love about memoir again is the recalling of memory. And sometimes, and I don't know if you had this, but memories that you thought had long gone, not even memories, you thought had long gone, just pop up and you go, oh my God, where did that even come from? And you look back, it's almost like looking back, watching a movie of your former self.
I get that all the time, yes. And to answer your question, I have different thoughts about her on different days because recently she's come up a lot. She's still somewhere inside of me when I'm nervous or when I feel not good enough. How do I feel about her generally? I used to feel like she was an idiot. I used to be very mad at her, especially before I had the ability to kind of look at myself from the outside. Right before I was like self-aware. This is one of the woke terms that I'm embarrassed I use. But now I love her because I wouldn't have been able to write Ougat if she didn't exist. If I didn't I wouldn't have been able to share things. I wouldn't have been able to relate to other people if I didn't make those mistakes as a 20-year-old. I don't even like the word mistakes. If those events didn't occur. But I promise there was a time where I was very it's like this anxiety that used to rise up in me. Like I can't even look at Facebook memories of her because she's sitting with Sydney and with my baby, and some of my Facebook memories still pop up, and it's Lyle. And I think you look so happy, you stupid girl. And then I need to
Sure.
realize that, you know, she needed to be so that I can be.
Yeah, yeah. Another theme that you cover really well in this book is shame, and I love talking about shame. I love writing about shame because I feel like, firstly, we are a generation of women, and I know I'm speaking specifically women, but and that's not to say that the book doesn't speak to men. Also, I think it speaks to everyone, but I think particularly also because it's Women's Month. But we are a generation of women who are carrying generations and generations of other people's shame. Yes, we're carrying some of our own shame, but it is minimal in comparison to the shame that we carry from our mothers and their mothers, and then just our families at large, and then add to that the weight of our communities. And I think particularly as women of color, me as a Black woman, you as a colored woman, we are carrying the weight of generational shame, and then people wonder why we act out sometimes, and it's like, well, because we're carrying all this stuff and you haven't allowed us the space to speak about it. You haven't provided safe spaces for us. We've had to create our own safe spaces, like by doing this, like by doing the blog, to do that. And we're all just learning at this this thing of trying to lift some of that and remove some of that and place back where it belongs, because it sure as shit doesn't belong with us half the time, this
Yeah.
transgenerational trauma and transgenerational shame. Is what's your first memory of shame? Is it linked to sex? Because I'm thinking specifically of that incident with when you're essentially 5 years old and masturbating on a cushion in a lounge and your mum walks in.
Yeah. So
And I love that you wrote that, though. I love that that's where you went, because that happened to all of us, but we're not allowed to talk about it.
yeah. And I only knew that that was a relevant thing when I had children. And, kids from very small, from 1 or 2, start discovering themselves. And it triggers that memory of, oh God. And my first reaction at the time was, what are you doing? No, and I felt my own shame. And I think that's
Sure.
how it works.
Yeah.
That's how we have our, like, whatever happened to, I'm not speaking of my mother specifically, but let's say something happens to my mom. How she raises me is directly affected by the shame she had to deal with and didn't deal with. So I don't know, it's hectic. My first memory of shame, that was my first memory of sexual shame. But I do remember feeling shame for a lot of things, for being loud, for being fat, for being dark. Like it sounds silly, maybe it doesn't sound silly, but I think I'm so desensitized to people saying this, right? That it shouldn't be normal. I felt shame at how I looked. That's not normal. That's right. Because my hair was curly and not straight. Because I couldn't fit into Jahan jeans. Like those were real moments that seem insignificant that destroyed my confidence and made me feel ashamed. But what am I supposed to do about how I'm born? But definitely sexual shame. That was the moment. I can still full on remember realizing my mommy can see me and knowing as a 5-year-old I want to die now.
Yeah.
I'm that's embarrassing. I shouldn't
Yeah.
have to be sexual. fully embarrassed as when I'm 5. I don't know what's happening. But the energy around sex was always shameful. And therefore, I knew instinctively that I should be ashamed.
One of the things, speaking of sex, one of the things that I love is how open you are about sex in the book, because again, that's another thing that, you know, good girls don't. And I love that you are unashamed in talking so openly about it. When you're writing with the candor that you do write about sex with, is there any part of you that's thinking, my kids are going to read this at some point, or the other partner who may be involved, or are you, how did you tackle that?
One day, a good friend of mine, Clifford, after having Scarlett, my third child, messaged me to say, have you ever considered that your daddy and everybody knows you let at least 3 people come in here? And that was the moment I knew I had no secrets. So when I wrote about, you know, those things or not, it's not like people think I'm innocent. It's just one of those not necessarily positive side effects of being, you know, labeled a hoe, but I didn't feel like I surprised anybody.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you surprised me a little bit.
Oh, did I? Okay.
I think another reason, another aspect to the book, and I know I'm jumping through, but there's so much that I want to cover, and I'm also aware of time, and I want people to be able to answer ask your questions. But another reason I think so many women of color particularly will relate to this book is because you put into words how so many of us have experienced issues around identity, and racial identity, and the intersection between class and color. And then you throw it into South Africa and it's just crazy. Colored identity, though, is a specifically difficult topic, right?
Yes. You can continue, sorry.
No, just, you know, I was thinking about something that Trevor Noah said a couple of years ago in Born a Crime. And he essentially, and I'm paraphrasing terribly, but he essentially said, you know, colored people have no idea who they are. They don't even speak their own language. And I mean, and he got absolutely dragged for that. And it was taken, you know, it was a paragraph taken out of the book. But it's essentially people were saying, listen, you don't get to speak to our lived experience as colored people, but there is a sort of internal debate around colored, so-called colored, not colored, embracing colored, the colored identity. That is something that those of us from the outside looking in probably shouldn't comment on. But also, I think, find, I don't know if mystifying is the right word, but find intriguing to see how many different angles and perspectives there are. But ultimately, around the issue of identity, colored identity is a difficult one.
It is. So I am no expert on it. I've been trying to learn about it. Firstly, I don't mind, personally, I cannot speak for other colored people. I don't mind people commenting. I cannot stop people from making observations. You know, there are certain factors that people can see from the outside. I think it's how one comments on it, that whether it's respectful or not, that's important. As for me, I I have to say I'm still struggling with what my colored identity is. Many people will give you many different answers, and that's okay. You know, we are all just our experiences and perception and what we've been taught. I don't. The latest thing that I've been pondering on is that color is not a race. It is an identity. It is a culture. Every color I know is mixed with something else. You know, has a different experience. But I'm still trying to pinpoint the one thing that makes me know someone is a color, particularly a Cape color, because it's like a sensor, right? You know, like it's we all know. Okay, now colored child, we all know this one thing. We all I can't even, I don't want to mention stereotypes because I was going to end out a few and I was like, maybe don't do that. But like,
Mm.
there's something about our, not even the things we like, about our voices and the way we can turn a phrase and the things we find funny. Colored some musical, fun, entertaining people, in my experience and in my opinion, right? And that doesn't matter where you come from. I can only speak for the Cape Colored experience. But yeah, I am still very, to answer your question, sorry, I am a rambler. I'm still very confused about where I fit in. I do know that there are certain words I don't like when people talk about colored people. You know, every race has its slur that only the race can say. I do not like the word "hum," particularly coming from anyone else's mouth besides me and my hum people, because I've been referred to as hum my whole life. What does that mean? Hum to me, I know it's like a vibe. It's how we use it. It's like, we come at school. How other people use it, this is the lower class version of colored. These are the colors that we don't let into the jaw. These are the colors that sip and then float on the suck packet when they are done, which is also a very fun time. You know, like there's a connotation to it that irritates me. But yeah, I'm still figuring out my own personal color identity because I don't know. I've been
Yeah.
told I could be koi, I could be, sorry if I'm saying that wrong, like koi sand, whatever. Like there are loads of options. I haven't found one that I feel Shana yet.
Mm. Mm. It's yeah, I enjoyed the parts where you were writing about identity. A lot I related to, some I didn't because I'm not colored, but I, particularly when you move from an area, and you move from Pelican Heights to, no, you're in Pelican Heights and you're going to school in Plumstead.
Yes.
You're the story of being the person of color in amongst the white people. That's a yeah, that's a trip. I'm so aware of time. We've got to move on, and we have to get to Lyle, because that is the most significant the most significant relationship that you write about in the book, other than the one that you have with yourself. Lyle being the father of your second child,
Yes.
Syria Rose.
Yes.
For me, I read your book. I got a pre-advanced copy of the book, which I like to tell people about. And there were moments where I read it and I was reading and I had to put it down, because it's when you come face to face with, first of all, your own lived experience, but through the eyes of somebody else or through the mouth of somebody else, it's pretty hectic, because you start realizing how crazy your own existence was once upon a time. Your writing of it, I think, is it's the perfect explanation of how we as women, as smart women, can end up having the shit kicked out of us emotionally and physically on the daily, and still not be able to leave. When you look back over that period with that man, what is your takeaway? What do you, apart from your daughter, what do you take away from that relationship?
So many things. Just give me a second to get my thoughts in order. I think I certainly know what I don't like anymore, what I don't allow, even no matter how much I love someone. I certainly have boundaries now. I didn't have boundaries before because I didn't feel worthy of boundaries. I feel not necessarily that the experience was needed, but I did need to find that part of myself that says no. And that says, I don't like that and I'm leaving this. Because leaving something is the most terrifying thing, no matter what it is.
Hmm. Hmm. The trauma that you went through at the hands of that man, many women will also relate to similar traumas, and being abused in the name of love, and being raped in the name of love, and being humiliated in the name of love. When you talk about boundaries, and that's sort of become a bit of a buzzword in pop psychology, and we all talk about having boundaries, and this one doesn't have boundaries and that one doesn't have boundaries. boundaries aren't something that happens overnight, are they? Boundaries are a process, and you have to learn. It's learning to put them up, and sometimes some of us are slower learners than others. Do you think that you, looking back at who you were then, do you think that you would, how do I phrase this question? Do you think that you would do anything differently now? And please do not misunderstand me in terms of, I'm not talking about your culpability in any of that, but would you do anything differently now that you are somebody who has boundaries? I don't think I'm asking the question clearly, actually. No, I don't think I'm asking that question clearly.
If I can ask, yes, I'm listening. So can I close this door? It's very loud.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
It keeps opening.
Guys, just a reminder that you can send your questions in, because I'm gonna wrap up in about, what is it, 5 past, in about 10 minutes time. So please do put your questions in. I can't see what format everyone's watching on, so YouTube or Facebook or whatever, please put your questions in for Shana. I don't know. Let me rephrase that question, because I don't want to suggest that you should have done anything differently. I suppose
I really don't feel that. I understand what you mean. If I could go back and do something differently in that relationship,
yes.
I would not answer that message you sent me to, hey, would you like to meet? Absolutely not. I wouldn't ask him what he's doing. I would just avoid. I would just run the other way. But I mean, we don't get that luxury, you know. And I think if I had a positive, I don't want to say I never had positive female influences. I love, the women in my family, even though I had to say some really true things, and difficult things. I think if I had instead of looking back, I think if I had someone with a foresight that had taught me this is actually the things you accept and the things you don't accept. After the first time he grabbed me, I would have left. If there's anything that I should have done, not even being hit, after that first feeling of what is he doing? Why doesn't this feel right? I would have been gone.
You've answered the question that I wanted to ask. I'm sorry for not being able to get my thoughts in order. There is that's what I wanted to ask you. You spoke about female role models just now. Your relationship with your mum, the way that you write about your relationship with your mum, made me, and this is a compliment, physically uncomfortable. Because I think probably because I related to it a lot. I think it is probably reflective of a lot of women's relationships with their mothers. It's almost a kind of love. It's almost a love-hate. And I hate that term because it's such a cliche, but it is almost a love-hate. And I think it probably is hate to an extent, because I think largely as mothers, unless you do a lot of work on yourself, I'm a mother to a daughter, there's a lot of narcissistic energy going on there. There's a lot of, there is, right? There is, and unconsciously, you're not doing it on purpose, but there is, you end up sort of, they are an extension of you. And again, this goes back to the boundaries. They're an extension of you, and there's almost, and so you have the feeling of, let me speak for myself, I often have the feeling of, this is just a part of me that's just outside of my body. It's just, you just independently, but still close to me. And so often it's the things, I guess, and we say, don't we, the things that we dislike in each other are the things that we don't like in ourselves. And I wonder if your relationship with your mom, well, first of all, has she read the book?
No.
Will she read the book?
No. She told me that she will as soon as she's emotionally ready, and I fully respect that.
Yeah.
I think that is understandable.
Are you anxious about her reading that book?
I think maybe a year or two ago I would have been, but our relationship has changed drastically. I want to say since before I got married, when I started to, be a fully functioning person up here. And also after my dad died, I think that also drastically changed our dynamic. So I'm not nervous about it. I think there might be a few awkward moments and questions, but that's what I've been having with everybody who's read it. So, no.
We'll get back to that about people who've read it. There's a moment in the book where you're just about to have Syria Rose. You're just about to give birth. I mean, there were, like I said, there were so many moments where I was completely floored. But and you've been speaking about sterilization with Lyle, and he definitely wants you to get sterilized. And a woman who you don't know comes and speaks to you, and she prays for you, and she tells you not to get sterilized. For me, it's one of the most poignant moments of the book. It is. You said that you just started crying, and this woman is praying for you. It's emotional even to talk about. If you could speak to that woman today, now that you have Scarlett, and not just now that you have Scarlett, but if you could just speak to that woman today who prayed for you as you're about to give birth to your second child in what can only be described as a horrific relationship, what would you say to her?
So shortly after that moment, I found out that when I worked at Teletech, when I met my first child's dad, I actually worked with her daughter. It turned out that she was the mother of one of my old friends, and I had no idea. She didn't know me, I didn't know her. We'd never met. We were only like, work friends. Her name is Nurse Figeland. I won't forget that now. And besides saying thank you, I feel like it's important that she knows that she's the type of woman I needed when I was growing up. That's the type of guidance that a lot of us are missing, and that makes her a very remarkable person. Because she didn't know me, and she used the intuition and saw that I was in trouble. Because I will never forget, the one thing that stood out to me, besides the fact that she was so comforting, was that it felt like she didn't even see that Lyle was standing next to me.
That was so powerful. That was incredible.
And I wasn't the type of person to talk to strangers, and I felt like I wanted her in my space. She made me comfortable for even a split second, because that was not a comfortable. Having a baby was supposed to be comfortable, and it wasn't, and that was a moment of comfort. So yeah, I wanted to know she's one of the most wonderful people I've met in my whole entire life, and it was for like 5 minutes.
Sure. That moment where you write about that and you say that, and it's so significant when you say it's as if she doesn't even see him, because he's there. He's there the whole time, and you feel that he is such a suffocating character. I mean, and I say character, obviously he was a real person, but in the book, his presence is so all-consuming, and you write it so clearly that he is just on you, around you, in you all the time, that the fact that here comes this woman, she almost floats into the page like an angel and doesn't even see this person. It was really incredible. At the start of your book, you refer to your relationship with Lyle as your first encounter with evil. Do you really believe he was evil, or do you really believe he was evil?
That's difficult, because when you have strong feelings about someone, it's hard to be like fair. And the truth is that if I'm going to write Ougat that speaks about our experiences that make us us, I have to acknowledge that he was a human that somewhere along the line was failed, or damaged. I'm not saying by anyone specific, just generally we encounter, people. I did feel at the start of writing Ougat that he was evil. I felt up until very recently that he was evil. The things he did to me, I don't necessarily depict everything. I chose specific moments that were significant, but not even the worst time,
Yeah.
The things that he did were
Why
evil.
did you leave out the worst time?
I sometimes don't So some things I'm not fully ready to even say or write or think about even. Sometimes I push it away. Like I'm still full on healing. If being healed is even a destination, that we get to. But
Yeah.
I don't know. There's certain things I also didn't want to put. I don't want to traumatize people. I wanted it to be relatable, not traumatic.
Oh, well.
Sorry again.
was quite traumatic. Was quite traumatic. Listen, on that, on what you said, and I think you've raised such a crucial point there. There is often an expectation that those of us who write memoir must have fully healed from our past and the traumas that we write about in our books. And I understand why people think that, because you would assume, because here's the neat package at the end. This is the book of healing. And again, there is an assumption that as authors of memoir, the catharsis of writing memoir means that by the time it's, our manuscript is sent off to the printers and to the publisher, we're all good and we're good to go, and that we've healed from all of the horrors. And as a result of that, it means that often people think it's open season to ask anything about what we might have gone through, and to ask about it in a way that is quite blasé, because after all, Shana wrote this book, so she must be fine. I love that you say that there's some stuff that you weren't ready to write about, and I think it's important that people remember that. It's important that people like me and other interviewers remember that, is that people aren't always healed from the stuff that they write about or don't write about. Do you still get triggered talking about events from your past?
Sometimes. So triggered is a strong word. But look, I know some people get realistically like triggered and it sets them off in ways that I can't even imagine. I do have I feel like triggered is a strong word, but I certainly do have moments of go away, go away, go away. Like, like get out of my mind. It doesn't fully affect my everyday life anymore. There was a time you said earlier, people feel like when you get to the book you healed. The opposite kind of happened to me. Only once it was out and I had to hand it over in its final state. I actually got physically ill. I was in bed for a couple of days. I couldn't move my arms, my body. There was nothing wrong with it. I went to the doctor. And they were like, it's stress, it's your feelings, feel your feelings. And only then I felt like now I have to start healing. The book was the beginning of the healing journey, not the end of it.
Oh, I so relate to that. I relate to that 100%. Probably most of my healing has come since Killing Caroline came out. 100%. And also people used to ask me, oh, what was your writing process? And I'd be like, well, it was fucking miserable for like a year. That's what it was. It was unadulterated trauma and misery. I'd write a chapter, cry on the floor, and then go back to it because I'd signed a piece of paper that said I had to.
I've never related to anything more. There's moments of I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done.
I'm
and
done.
Then it's like, okay, I'm gonna finish.
We have got some questions, but I just want to I'm loving the comments that are coming in. I just want to I will finish with you. I'll finish with you and then we'll go to some questions. I think that a lot of women will relate to having been in abusive relationships and then meeting someone who isn't abusive, and the often very confusing sort of transition that happens between an abusive partner and a non-abusive partner. There is often still, as there was in your case, an awful lot of unresolved trauma, an awful lot of fear, a lot of anger. How have you dealt with that with your husband? Have I frozen or is she frozen?
I'm not sure. My internet seems okay.
Oh, there we go. Okay, cool. Did you hear that question? Eek. Oh, heavens. We don't want that. Here comes
Let's
Jennifer
wait
to
and
save the day.
Well, I don't know about that. I wonder if Shana's internet will come back. It looks like here it
I'm
is.
here.
There she is. There she is. Did you hear my last question? Oh no, she's not. Now she's gone again. Oh.
I wonder if we should ask her to disconnect and reconnect.
Shana, if you can hear us, please. If you can hear us, please disconnect and then reconnect, if you wouldn't mind. And while you're doing that, I shall entertain with song. I won't be doing that at all. I'm not going to do that. What I will do, though, is a shameless plug of this. If you haven't got a copy already, please go and get a copy. It is quite extraordinary. We've only had an hour to touch on some of the issues that Shana talks about in the book, and some of the truths that she tells in the book. But please do make sure that you go and get yourselves a copy. I'm not going to lie, it's not always easy reading, but it is always brilliant writing. Are you back? Yes.
I think so. I
good.
think I am.
Okay, perfect.
Sorry about that.
No, all good. So just my question was around coming out of a traumatic relationship with an abuser and into a relationship with a man who isn't an abuser, and that strange sort of transition period, and some of the things that you went through in with the anger, the unresolved trauma, all of that.
I did not trust my boyfriend. Well, Riyad, when he was my boyfriend, at all, with anything. He'd never done anything for me to not trust him. And it's a significant thing. But I went from being okay. In the beginning, it was romantic. It was fine. And as soon as it became serious, as soon as I introduced him to my mom and he met the children, I was immediately suspicious of everything that he wanted to do. I didn't even recognize myself, but I couldn't stop myself. I became an abuser for a short part of my relationship.
Yeah.
I I remember. So I do say in Ougat, I kept wanting to know what was on his phone. Like there was once where I hit him twice actually, and that was the last time. But it was all responsive. I'm not making any excuses. I am responsible for my own actions, and we've worked through it. But I can't explain why it happened, except for I felt like whenever we'd start an argument, I was ready to go because that's all I knew. I only knew that I was supposed to defend myself. I was supposed to be ready, or somebody's going to hit me at the back of my head when I'm not looking. So I felt like a bit of an animal. But when it came to, I wanted to say this earlier, when it came to checking his phone, I think people assumed from what I wrote that I would always check it. I think that the byproduct of coming from an abusive relationship was I would never check it. I couldn't even make eye contact with his phone screen because I was very scared and there'd be moments where he'd say, just look. And I'd get so angry for him trying to show me his phone screen that I would not speak to him for a day or two. Like, I can't even explain the next relationship is worse than the abusive relationship because it's me fucking it up. Yes, I don't have anybody to blame. I'm the one fucking it up. So we had to.
Come on, internet, please don't let us down. We need 9 more minutes.
I don't know what just happened, but yeah,
right.
that was a difficult time. It was, and I can I don't even know. My mind that's still something that I feel like I deal with every day because I have a wonderful husband. We're not perfect. We have our moments, but that was a strange time. And because no one had told me what it was like to come out of an
Ish. No. Oh, you're jumping in and out. Listen, we've got to take some questions. My last question is this: when you write memoir, you are writing your experience of events and your memory of events, but there will be other people, as there were,
that should be better, I think.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I
Okay,
went on to my
sorry.
daughter. I don't know
I
what's
was just saying that
happening.
when you write in this genre, it's obviously it's your memory of events, and there will have been other people who were also witness to those events who experienced them differently. When I was writing my book, my publisher told me write as if they're dead, because I started getting so terrified of what if this, what if that, and how did
Like,
you how
yeah.
did how did you deal with, and how do you deal with people's responses to the book, and what have people's responses been who perhaps were in the book or um involved?
I'm glad you asked me this question. This is something that I had to deal with. So there was one person that I not regret writing, but I feel because sometimes in the writing bubble, when it's about me, I forget that the other characters are real.
Mm-hmm.
I told my Auntie Brenda's story without full sign of from her emotionally. And here's why that matters to me more than the other stories I told. The other stories I told, everything I told was true, but from my perspective,
Yeah.
and those were really significant things that happened to me, right? And I don't feel sorry. I'm sorry if anybody was offended, but I needed to be honest. I needed to be honest. It was done from honesty. When it comes to the story of my Auntie Brenda, who's at a little bit of the end of the book, I feel like I told her story.
Okay.
And only in retrospect, I now know that that's not okay because I wouldn't have wanted somebody to find out. I've spoken to her. We've spoken. She says she loves the book. She all of those things. But personally, it was a lesson for me in making sure that when you're not telling it from you, that the person who was mostly affected is okay.
Mm.
But we live and we learn, and I've asked for forgiveness, and she fully supports me. We've had our cry together. Um, Everything else, I care. I tried to hide names, identities. Nobody's real name is used in the book. And if that moment
Really?
was, yeah, nobody's real name. I
Nobody?
changed it. No, I didn't want to hurt
So
anyone.
invested in your children's names?
Except my kids. My kids, yes,
Huh.
but like other people. Sorry, like the people I speak about
Okay.
from my past, Riyadh and Lyle, and my children. Those are the
Yeah.
only real names. Everybody else I changed. I
Yeah.
didn't want to expose anybody who, because I don't think the people who I speak about and who are still alive are the same people they were at that time. We all grow. They have
100%.
their own journey.
Yeah.
They don't. I don't think that they deserve to be put on blast. But
Yeah.
I had to do it. I had to say it. And I can understand that some people in my family are not happy, but they know that I told the truth, and
Yeah.
we are all allowed to tell our truth.
Yeah. We are all allowed to tell our own truths. Absolutely. Let's get some questions because I've talked for too long.
We have quite a few questions. Here is the first one. I'll read it out. What has the feedback been from any men that have read your book? I think that this is a very important book for women to read, but men too, especially men in the colored community.
Surprisingly, a lot of men have not surprising. Well, it was surprising to me. A lot of men were very positive about it, particularly older men. There were many that said we needed this. Even guys my age, my friends' husbands, for example, they were they said thank you for the perspective, and I like that. I like that they were open to it. That shows something. It shows sort of people are ready, men are ready to hear us.
That's very nice to hear. As a person of color, how did you navigate telling your story so authentically, especially as it relates to your family and those in your circle? I'm super excited to read the book.
That is a real thing. As a person of color, we don't talk out. But I wanted to be. I wanted it's even for my family. I have younger cousins. I have girls who have just been born into my family. I have boys. I'm even raising girls and boys. I did it. It feels like because of them, but I also did it for them.
We've got a. I'm not sure if I put this one on the screen before. It's not really a question, but it's a comment. But I think you could answer it as a question. That part about mothers. I've always wanted to ask how you navigated your relationship with your mom after dealing with and writing about these truths.
So I feel like, oh, let me get my thoughts together. I feel like the colored girl or girl of color relationship with our moms is all very similar, even if it's unique. So when my mom, just giving a little bit of background before I answer the question. When my mom and when I was growing up, my mother, we were not close. But because of her trauma, because whatever happened to her that I don't know, whether it was big or small, she was who she was, and that's how she chose to raise me. When my life fell apart, my mother was the one person who didn't stop coming and fetching me and telling me without like she made me realize that love wasn't necessarily affection. It was get the fuck out of this man's house. You know what I mean? Come home. I could there was never a time where she said no, I can't come back, you know. Sorry, now I'm crying. Anyway, because of that, when I realized that the love I was looking for and the love I was being given was both valuable, particularly from my mom, it made it easier to kind of understand her. And the older I get, I also understand her. So, oh, how I navigated the relationship after dealing with writing. I think it's better now. I think that we are closer, and I understand her more. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Well, if that's one thing that comes out of the book, I think it's a very valuable thing to emerge. This is not really a question, but I feel like it's an important comment. You're absolutely correct about when to leave. I reacted immediately when the hand was raised in a playful way. When it was said, no, I'm only playing. I think it's an important thing for women to know about.
Definitely.
As a mother and knowing what you do, how do you go about teaching sexual reproductive health to the next generation? Any tips?
Yeah. I'm not an expert, but I'm honest with my children. I'm either honest or I tell my son, bear with me. I say Google it, but I'm there for the whole journey. I don't always have all of the facts and the answers about certain things about, you know. There's a reason I say my son is my daughters aren't really asking things yet. He's 11. And so I get bombarded with sex questions. Probably his dad more, but me sometimes. And I'll give him the honest answer, but I don't offer more information than he asks. And if I don't know something, I just go, I make sure there's no shame around it. I think that's the important thing. I think no matter how we go about it or we talk about it, I make sure he knows the full context of the situation. I kind of explain the undertones to my children. I think people might say I over explain it. But I kind of say, yes, this isn't sometimes an uncomfortable topic, but here are the facts, and it's okay however you feel about it. And that's how I go about every question.
I think that's solid advice. Here's a question that relates interestingly to what Sara-Jayne was saying earlier. Do you think you would have still written this book in the way you have if Lyle was still alive?
Great question.
I want to say yes, but I think I would have been scared of him because he would have come and hurt me or my family. I would not suggest that anyone, because my blog started when he was alive. And he had this weird relationship with it where he was proud that I was speaking about him because he was a narcissist. And he also hated that I was speaking about him because he still wanted to go for other women. So I think he would have had an ego boost that there was a book about him, and he would have also tried to kill me.
Geez, well, the comments are coming in quick and fast, mainly just supportive comments at the moment from your earlier answer about your mom. So I think if you want to go onto Facebook afterwards and just have a look at all the comments that people are leaving. But just a final question. Are you interested in writing fiction, or will you stick with autobiography? I think you should definitely write some fiction if you haven't already.
I can't really. I am interested in writing fiction. Definitely. I don't
Okay,
think
that sounds promising.
that I'll write another memoir because I feel like even though it was just about my abusive stuff, I think that I would like to close the writing about Shana chapter or book and move on to projects that, show a different side of me.
You've definitely got a style for it, I would say. I would definitely
Thank
read
you.
that novel. Sara-Jayne, do you have any closing thoughts?
Just, I guess my last question would be, obviously so many people are going to already have read the book and will be reading the book. What would be the most personally satisfying thing that somebody could say to you after they've read the book?
Please say that again. I didn't hear you.
What would be the most personally satisfying or gratifying thing that somebody could say to you after having read your book?
I don't know what words they'd use, but definitely along the lines of it made me realize whatever the thing is, and that it was part of the realization moment.
Yeah.
Because I really did want it to just be an, oh, okay, now I know I'm okay moment for people.
Well, it is that and more. It is. I read a lot of books. I'm very lucky in that publishers send me books all the time for free, nogal. And this is one that I didn't pay for, but I would have done if I hadn't had it for free. And I think it's probably it's definitely my book of the year, but it's probably the most powerful thing that I've read in a really long time. And I think yes, it's you are a certain woman of a certain race in a certain time in a certain period with a certain story, but I think it speaks to so many women's experiences, and again, it's the fact that you write so truthfully and so authentically that it will cross race and class and global positioning. I think things that you write about in the book are things that will relate to many women, and I think will be that realization and that turning point for many people. So thank you for writing it.
I just want to thank Jonathan Ball Publishers for helping us put this event together. I want to thank Shana and Sara-Jayne for a fascinating conversation. And I especially want to thank Shana for sharing her extraordinary story with us with such wisdom and such humor. If you haven't got yourself a copy of Ougat yet, it's available now at all good bookshops and online. So you can buy yourself a copy right now as you're sitting watching this, or you can go out tomorrow morning and get yourself one from a bookshop if you can't wait. But I definitely recommend you do that if you haven't already. You'll know it by its beautiful bright cover. You can't really miss it. And yeah, thank you very much for joining us.
Oh my God, I'm sorry.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm glad you managed to have some kind of cathartic conversation about the book. And thanks to Sara-Jayne for the questions.
Thank you very much, guys.
Good night.
I am trying to leave. Bye.